Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hello, everyone. It's Wednesday night, so you know what that means. Welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show. I am Patti Callahan Henry.
And I'm Ron Block.
And this is Friends and Fiction, 4 New York Times bestselling authors, a rock star librarian, endless stories to support independent bookstores, authors, and librarians. On this week's show, Ron and I are thrilled, we've been talking about her behind her back, to welcome bestselling author Jo Piazza to discuss her newest amazing novel, The Sicilian Inheritance. This book was just released last week, and we are so excited to talk with her.
But first, we have a quick reminder to check out all the fun things going on in our Friends and Fiction community at friendsandfiction.com. There you'll find our show schedule, details on upcoming in-person events, and links to our bookshop.org page and to the Friends and Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa, the merch store, our book subscription box, and our weekly email newsletter sign up. And I know, in other words, if you want to know more about anything Friends and Fiction has, and we offer a lot, be sure to check out friendsandfiction.com.
I know whenever I see it all listed or hear it listed in one place like that, I'm like, wow.
I need
our live events are coming up. We got the
Yes.
box. We got so much stuff. So now let's talk about Jo behind her back.
Yay.
She is a podcast creator, award-winning journalist, and best-selling author of several novels, including We Are Not Like Them, Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win. That title cracks me up. The Knockoff and How to Be Married. I think she needs to have a chat with me.
Okay, her work has been published in 10 languages in 12 countries, and 4 of her books have been optioned for film and television. And fingers crossed for this one.
I know. Wouldn't it be amazing to see this one on the screen?
I've got it all casted.
I know. The
Cast.
cave,
Okay.
the witch. I know. Okay. I am fascinated by the sheer number and creative subjects in Jo's podcasts, which have garnered more than 25 million downloads and regularly top the podcast charts. An editor, columnist, and travel writer, her work has also appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, New York Magazine, Marie Claire, Glamour, and many more.
Tears me out.
I know.
Okay, Jo lives in Philly with her husband and 3 children. Her new novel, The Sicilian
You got it
Inheritance,
backwards.
is rooted in her own family history and was just released, as Patti said, last week.
Sean, can you bring Jo on?
Hello, everybody.
It is so good to see you. What a pub week. It has been amazing for you. I'm so excited to talk about this book. I got a very early read, so I have been shouting out about it for a long time, and it's finally here. It's finally
here. Today is the day. Last week was the day. I've been wearing outfits all week to match the book cover. I mean, I figure if you're gonna write a book about Sicily, like, you better go all out. You better match the cover. You better get loud. You better eat all the food.
You better have a Negroni or 2 or 10. I mean, come on.
Totally. I mean, this week it's apparently just, National Jo Piazza Negroni Week is what this week has been since April 2nd.
Absolutely.
Oh, and
Absolutely.
Italian food
To me,
week, too.
And Italian food week.
Oh.
For me on social media, it's always Jo week because you're social media. But we're going to talk about that later. Right now, I'm so thrilled to get to talk to you about The Sicilian Inheritance. Once a girl from Philadelphia, me too. I love watching all of your posts and comments about your life. But I was lucky enough to get an early read, and my blurb says partly this because it was really long. The Sicilian Inheritance is an addictive family saga with a rich abundance of strong women, quick wit, immersive history, and a page-turning suspense, with a dash of Mario Puzo and a hint of Nora Ephron. I love that. because that's what it
It's
felt
so
like to me.
good.
So this novel is about a long-awaited trip to Sicily, a disputed inheritance, and a family secret that some will kill to protect. There's Sarah and Rose and Serafina and Satina and Jissy. How do I say that name? Guissy?
It's Juicy. Her name is Juicy.
Juicy.
Short for Giuseppina. And the craziest thing about Juicy's character is that she's one of those characters that really came to me like out of nowhere. I didn't know the name Giuseppina even existed or that Juicy was the nickname for it. This woman just showed up in my head and was like, I am Juicy and you will write me.
That is awesome. There are so many savvy, strong women in this novel. So tell us more about the novel.
Yeah. So the Sicilian Inheritance, I set out really, I wanted to write a delicious book. I've been wanting to write this book forever. And I finally sat down and like really started writing in earnest during the pandemic when I think we all wanted to escape.
Mm-hmm.
And we all wanted to go somewhere else that wasn't our bedroom and eat delicious food. And I've been to Sicily many times over the years. My family's originally from there. And I just wanted to write a delicious adventure. And the Sicilian Inheritance is also my first foray into some historical fiction, which is why, Patti was one of the first people I wanted to get this book to. It takes place on 2 timelines. In the past, we have a young Sicilian woman named Serafina who has a lot of ambitions. She wants more than the world will let her have as a Sicilian woman at the turn of the century. But she gets unexpectedly pregnant and has to get married, and she's kind of relegated to the role of wife and mother. But when her husband goes to America, like a million Sicilian men did around that time period, she finally gets to take on a job and to learn to read and write and like really like follow her ambitions in the world. And we watch her as she does that. And it's not always safe. It's a dangerous thing for a woman to follow her ambitions. And in the present day, we have a butcher and chef in Philadelphia. I set all of my books at least partly in Philadelphia these days, guys. I'm like, it's the greatest city in the world. Love it here.
I love it.
I'm such a weird Philly booster. So she has a restaurant in Philadelphia, and it's not doing well. It's closing down, and her life is kind of falling apart. But she inherits this deed that may or may not be real in Sicily when her great aunt Rosie passes away. And her great aunt Rosie, in her last letter to her, encourages her to go back to Sicily to try to figure this out. But once she gets there, she gets another letter from Aunt Rosie that says, I also think that something terrible may have happened to my mother, Serafina. Can you please try to figure out what happened to her? And so Sarah tries to unravel this mystery as we, as readers, get to follow Serafina as she grows up, chases her ambitions, and she, ends up being pursued by some very dangerous forces in Sicily.
That's perfect. The perfect nutshell of the book. But one of the things I read in the author's note and in some of the things that you've posted online, that it's inspired by true family stories, mostly about your great-great-grandmother, Lorenza Marsala, in Sicily in 1916 and her possible murder. It was a story that was passed down through generations. So tell us all about this and why you said that now is the time to write this and turn it into a novel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've heard this story of my great-great-grandmother's murder for years. Like, it's been passed around my family. We are Italian Americans. We love telling stories. We love making up stories. I mean, some of my family members are just outright liars. Okay. So I had no idea what was
make a living
actually
off of that, right?
true about any of this. But there's lots of threads. It's that she was killed before she could come to the U.S. to join her husband and her sons. She may have been killed by the mafia. And again, that one always comes out by the uncles that really love The Godfather and The Sopranos. She may have been killed because she was a witch or a healer and she didn't heal, or she cast a spell on the wrong person. And I didn't know any more than that. And I didn't really want to when I sat down to write the book. I wanted to take that nugget of a woman left behind in Sicily and think about what that would be like. What is your life like when you finally don't have to be a mother and a wife anymore? Like, what can you do? Like, what kind of freedom does that offer you? And so I didn't dig into anything more than like the basic family story while I was writing the book. I was like, all right, I've got this. I'm going to sit and I'm going to fly by the seat of my pants and see what happens. And it really felt like this story wanted to be told more so than any story that I've ever written. Like it just it flowed out of me in a way that I had never experienced before. It was awesome. And these characters presented themselves. I had no idea how this book was going to end when I sat down to start it.
Oh,
and
wow.
then when it finally came to me, I was like, well, that is a banger. That is a surprise, everybody.
Yes.
Didn't see that coming. But then, because I'm an incredibly thorough content creator, when I finished the book and turned it in, I did decide to solve the murder in real life. So I've created a true crime podcast where I go back and actually try to solve the murder in Sicily.
Oh, we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Intense. It's been intense.
But I was curious whether you did a lot of that or knew a lot of that before or after you wrote the book, and you just told us you wanted to use only the nugget for the spur of the story or the seed of the story, and then you
let your imagination fly.
Only the nugget. Well, and I haven't talked about this that much in interviews yet, but because this is like a podcast that talks about craft and it's like people that just love fiction, I do think that there's a magic in like letting your imagination run wild. And I'm a journalist by trade, and so I like to report. And it was scary to me to not report as much as I usually do. Yeah. But also, like I think you can kind of feel it in this book. My husband said that when he was reading it, he's like, it just feels different than your other books because it feels like you were letting the flow happen in a way that you don't usually allow.
I think the trueness of it opened like a portal.
Yeah.
I do believe in weird stuff like that.
So
when you tap into it, right, you took a real seed and then you watered the hell out of that thing.
I watered the hell out of it. One crazy thing is that for the podcast, I have interviewed one of my favorite mediums. I know so many mediums at this point. I have to be like, one of my favorite mediums.
Gosh, I need to know just one. That's awesome.
Yeah, Marianne DeMarco. She's great, and so she has been trying to reach out to my great grandmother, and she was like, you know what? She's like, she has a lot to say to you. This was the first thing she said to me. She's like, but she's just so happy that the stories of these women left behind have been told. She's like, and they're all happy about it. And I was like, oh my God, do I have like all these Sicilian ghost women on my shoulders? Like cheering me on at this point?
Awesome. I love they're going to be on book tour with you too.
Oh, they're coming.
They will be there every stop of the way. So that leads to a little bit of a side note, but I want to know, as you were writing it and not knowing exactly what you were writing, did you know that these were all going to be such powerful, strong women like Patti had mentioned earlier?
Nope. I sure didn't.
Oof.
Like I said, I knew the nugget. I knew we were going to have a modern day woman go back and try to solve this murder, but I did not have all of the strong women written. I didn't have all of these themes of women supporting other women and helping other women, which, is something that I write about in most of my writing. If there's any one thread through my books and podcasts and journalism, it's that, women must support other women and support other women's ambitions if any of us are going to succeed in the world. But I didn't see any of them coming. I really didn't. They all blindsided me at different times.
That's awesome. So you mentioned the True Crime podcast for this. Say the name so everybody knows
It's also called The Sicilian Inheritance because you know what I like as a mom of 3 small children? I like to make life easy. I like just make it efficient and easy. And if you're like, wow, I like this book, The Sicilian Inheritance, the podcast is called the same exact thing. You can find it.
There we go. All right. So the True Crime podcast, where you're trying to solve it. I read that it gave you some crazy ass dreams. And so I know we talk a lot about how we change a novel and how we get in there and dig through the plot. But I also believe that each novel changes us.
Oh, yeah.
Especially one like this. So talk to us about how writing this novel has affected your life and changed you, aside from the crazy dreams.
Oh, so many dreams, though. I mean, I have dreams that I'm in Sicily all the time, back in 1916, hanging out on the farm, and I don't see what's coming up behind me. But yeah, This book has given me a new kind of confidence, I think, moving around in the world. And one thing that I've discovered about Sicilian women, spending so much time with them, both in real life in Sicily and now in my imagination with all of these, Sicilian ghosts that now live in my house, apparently, is their intense confidence.
Let's call them spirits.
The Sicilian spirits. That
they sound friendlier that way.
Oh, they're definitely friendly. I mean, they love me. I can tell.
Okay.
They're very supportive spirits, and it's this confidence and this idea of moving through the world, like you belong there, like you deserve to be there, and it's. I think it's partially, I'm a 43-year-old woman now. Like I feel a lot more comfortable in my skin, but writing this book has also given me this confidence to, speak up and to just kind of be bigger in the world and to not be so afraid of asking for what I want. And it's been a real gift. And I mean, oh my God, I wish I could tell my 20-something self all of these things, but you can't because you have to do all the things to get to where you are.
They won't listen anyway.
They won't listen. She will not. She's very busy. Okay. Very busy dating appropriate men is what she's doing.
Okay.
Wait a second. I want to go back to how it changed you. So, So it makes you feel stronger, bigger in the world. But do you feel in some ways more connected to your familial history after doing this? Like part of a line and a genealogy that's really powerful? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I absolutely feel like, I can feel the power of coming from a line and a genealogy of strong, really capable women. And I think that's so important because I think the stories that we tell ourselves about our identity and about where we come from are really important. And for so long, we didn't know anything about my great-great-grandmother. Most of my relatives didn't even know her name. She was just a dead woman, a murdered woman. And my biggest goal with both the book and the podcast was to celebrate her life and not her death. And, I like to say, I'm like, we are starting with a dead woman, but we're not ending up that way. We're getting so much more out of this story. And even with the podcast, it's less about what happens to her at the end and like trying to recreate her life. She's in this small village on top of a rock, on top of a mountain called Caltabalota in real life. It's called Caltabalessa in the book, so I could have a little bit more fun with it. And she lives down the street from her sister and her parents and her brother-in-law. And she's a seamstress and she spins wool into yarn, and they have a farm that's just outside of town that she walks to or she takes a mule to every day. Like all of those details, and also thinking about how hard her life was, how lonely she may have been, but also like how she persevered through so many things. I think it helps give me strength in the world. Like we live in a strange world today. It's very uncertain. It's very unexpected. And it gives me strength to be able to do hard things, to get through hard things when I think about everything that she went through.
Yeah, I fell down a genealogy rabbit hole the past few months. And for me, it's the Irish, not the Italian. And we ended up in Philadelphia also, but between the famine and the rebellion and I think if they got through it, I come on, what don't I want?
Right.
What if they had a washing machine, for God's sake, right? Yes. So I was just wondering if by digging into all of that, you felt more connected to that whole line.
Oh, I totally do. Well, and it's also, I feel so lucky to now be able to pass these stories down. I mean, both the book and the world, and then the real stories to my two daughters, because I grew up kind of hearing them, but not a lot. But also being Italian-American, I'm also Irish, by the way. My dad was Italian-Irish. He just never talks about the Irish part because he loved the Italian part so much. Like I knew about it. Like it was actually part of my identity because I was closer, but my kids are massive mutts. Like Nick is 4 different things. I'm 4 different things. Like, so I think because of these stories I created, it will mean something to them.
Oh, that's awesome.
Also, we're also getting Italian citizenship because part
cool.
of this research process, I've dug into so many records that I got all of the things I need to get my Italian passport.
Oh,
and so
cool.
I mean, it's just like, again, yet another cool thing that happened because of this book.
Oh, that's so
I love that. And speaking of research, let's talk about that a little bit, because anybody who follows you on Instagram has had such a treat of seeing where you were, what you've done, and talk about the actual research of doing that.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
why, when you said earlier, it was this, you wanted to write a delicious novel. I wanted every
Delicious.
meal you ate. I wanted every
Yes.
drink you had, everything there.
Yeah, that was really the goal. I when I started writing, I had to do a lot of it from memory and from pictures, and then the world opened up again. And so I took my whole family to Sicily last summer. My husband and I, and then our 6-year-old, our 4-year-old, and the baby was 5 months at the time. And we went to Italy for a month, and which was crazy, by the way, just crazy, but also wonderful. And parenting is hard everywhere. You might as well be somewhere with delicious food, is
Yeah,
what
good
I always
point.
say.
That is a very good point.
Yeah. And so the book was finished at that point, but I had exactly a week to just like do additions. So I took my computer to every single meal with me, and I just sat there and I ate every dish that was in the book, and then some, and then I added some, and I would just describe it in detail while I was eating. And then,
Oh my gosh, that's so great.
Yeah.
I know. And then I would have some wine and walk around the restaurant and ask other people to describe their food to me, which my husband's like, oh my God, really? Really? But they loved it. Because, I mean, how would you feel if you're sitting there and someone's like, I'm an author and I just want to hear you describe this pasta to me? This one guy was like, he was eating a black squid ink pasta, and he's like, it feels like eating the ocean. And I'm like, yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
using that.
I'm taking it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm taking it. And so, yeah, that was, and I had, as I said, I've been there about a dozen times. So I had a lot to borrow from when I was writing all the descriptions of the land and the beaches and the coastline. I mean, for me, I wanted to give Sicily, the island, real main character energy in this book, because I wanted it to feel like a character. It is a beautiful and magical and also, slightly broken place that I don't see in a lot of books. And I really wanted to celebrate all of those facets of it, and give it all those things. But then I turn in the book, but then I had to ask for it back. This is a cover thing, which I think is a fun thing for like readers who really like historical accuracy, because this was my first time doing historical fiction. I was like, I will not screw this up. So my cover art is set in Palermo. The book there's 2 different scenes on each timeline in Palermo, and it's set in the Quattro Conti, which is the old heart of the historical district. There's a beautiful church there, and we have a woman leaning out of the window on the cover. It's like really a 3rd-story window. So I have the cover of the book. I go into the church when I'm finally back in Sicily, and I'm like, oh my God, there's no way for her to get in that window. This cannot stand. This cannot stand. And so the book is already in copy editing. It is far away from me at this point, and I had to ask for it back. And they're like, fine, you get 10 minutes, Jo. And I'm like, cool, I got this. So I added a ladder into that scene. I was like, she is going to climb. There is a ladder there so she can get to that window.
That is awesome.
Hysterical.
That is awesome.
I do love it. But I want to ask about the title and how you got to the title, because at first I thought, oh, it's a nice title. Oh, it's going to be a great story. But as I was going through the book, I continued to read into it, and it really just struck me about the significance of the title over every character as the story went along, and more pieces of it went into the inheritance.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think about titles a lot. My co-author, Christine Pride, and I talk about titles constantly. And when we wrote We Are Not Like Them, the whole purpose of that title was that it could mean a lot of different things to different people. We're like, who is the we? Who is the them? And I wanted to do the same thing with the Sicilian inheritance, so that the meaning of the title evolves through the book. What is the inheritance? You go in thinking you're like, it's money, it's land, it's an inheritance. But, at the end of the day, the inheritance is really the things that shape Sarah and what she takes away from learning about this story and uncovering this mystery. And I think the inheritance is also kind of a character in the book, because it's like, what do we take from our ancestors? What do they give us? What do we choose to keep too? Because I think the things that we decide to make a part of our story are just as important as the things that we decide not to put into our stories. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I haven't talked about it a lot. And there was a lot of thought that went into that title. It's been the title since the beginning of this book. And the other really interesting thing about this book is I hadn't written a whole novel just for me in 10 years.
Oh, wow, Jo.
Yeah. And I did this one. I told my husband, I remember we were hiking with the kids, and I'm like, I'm just gonna write this. And he's like, you should. He's like, he's like, don't even think about whether or not you're gonna sell it or what's gonna happen with it. He's like, just
where
write
it fits in the market, whether
it fits in the market.
Okay.
Like, is this your swim lane? And I'm like, because it's not my lane. I'm like, I haven't.
Is it your box? Is it the box they want to put you in or not?
Yeah. And I was like, okay. I'm like, that's scary to me. Like, as a person who's like, writing is my career. And I'm like, it's scary to me to do this whole book without knowing what will happen to it, but I'll do it. And I think that was also part of the magic of it, that I like kind of let it go. And if at the end of the day, it was just for me, then it was just for me, and just for my kids, and just so that we could tell this story.
I love it, because it freed you up to tell the story you wanted to tell. It freed me
up so much. It was so relaxing. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, also, I have to pay my mortgage, so I can't just do that all the time. But like, it was really nice.
Well, I think this one's going to work out okay.
So there is also another woman in the window. When you, on your Substack, tell everybody about your Substack really quick. What's it called?
Oh, yeah. So my Substack is called Over the Influence, and it's a play on my podcast Under the Influence, where I talk about, it started out being all about social media and how it impacts every aspect of our lives, but it's really evolved into what is it like to be a woman in the world. And so, Over the Influence is the Substack companion to that, where I do a lot of like inside interviews with our guests, but then also I write about my life more than I ever expected. Like, I never expected to just like be this person who is constantly writing about motherhood and being a wife and being a friend. But I have been, and it's been wonderful, because the readers, I think women are hungry for these stories, and we're hungry to connect through our stories. And so we've created this really awesome community that way.
But you introduced another woman in the window. There was a mysterious lady at the window. And it's when you were doing your research about the murder, but your book was already done. I want you to tell that story.
Yeah. Well, this is a small village in Sicily, so there are many women in the window, many women looking out of their windows all of the time. There really are. So I've gotten to go back to Sicily twice for the podcast. I went with my family, and then I went on my own. Or I got back about 3 weeks ago, and then my best friend ended up coming with me on that trip. So we were about to start doing an interview with this photographer who had all of these old pictures from town, and we were checking to see if he had any old pictures of Lorenza, because he had just acquired troves and troves of photographs. And we're like, it's a small town. There were 1,000 people who lived in the village when she was there. There's 500 there. We might find a photo of her that we didn't know existed. And we're trying to park the car, and we park. And all of a sudden, this woman of indeterminate age, I mean, she could have been 107, starts saying, no. Oh, there was a broken chair in the middle of the road in the parking spot. My best friend gets out. She moves the chair. And then I pull into the spot, and this woman comes, she leans all the way out of her window, this beaded window. All of the windows are just beaded without curtains. And she's like, no. And my best friend starts talking to her in English. I'm talking to her in broken Italian. And she calms down when she hears the English. Like, we didn't do this on purpose, clearly. And then she tells me in Italian, she's like, no, she's like, I put that broken chair there so no one will park there, because this is how I watch the world. I can't leave the house. I can't walk very well. And so I don't like there to be a car right in front of the house, because then I can't see things. I can't see who's walking around. I can't yell to Antonio across the street and tell him to come over and tell me news. She's like, so park here, but put the chair back. And so we were like, yeah, of course. And then she also started telling us stories about the village and about her grandmother. And then she connected us to her sister, who was even older than she was, who had other stories, who might remember stories about Lorenza. And it was just, I mean, it was small town reporting to like the umpteenth degree.
To the ninth, I know.
It really was. And so, you know, we then we interviewed her. We went to go talk to the photographer, and we put her chair back. And she was still there. She was still sitting there to make sure that we put her chair back. And she's like, okay. She's like, you know, grazie. And we're like, yes, thank you so much. And she's in the podcast. And the podcast is filled with characters like that who you don't expect to meet. We interviewed all of these people in the town who are over the age of 90, who wouldn't have been alive when Lorenza was alive, but would have like heard stories about her and heard stories about what life was like back then. And I had an incredible translator. So I had a lot of help because Sicilian dialect, especially when people are that old, is very different than Italian.
Okay.
Too. So I could hardly understand any of it, but I had a great translator. And we also dug through, I got access. This is why I just got back. I got access to the homicide and mafia records from 1960.
I was waiting for you to say that. That is so cool.
It was crazy pants. It took a year. It took a year and a lot of writing letters in Italian, trying to explain what I wanted to do with these records. And one of the reasons that it took so long is because the records are scheduled to be destroyed for no other reason than they don't have room for them anymore. So I went down into the basement. I had to go through like 3 different sub basements. It's dark.
Wow.
The lights don't come on until you get in there and find a light switch. You have to wear a mask because it's so dusty, and you have to wear gloves because the dust is so thick your hands will get stained black. And also so you don't damage these old books. But there was like a Post-it on the shelves saying scheduled to be destroyed. So the fact that I got there and I got to them before that happened, I mean, it does feel really magical. And I dug into all those, right? I spent days in like the basement of this courthouse going through them. And it's incredible what you can find out about a life by going through court records, but also land records and deeds. One of the things it's one of the things we discovered in the podcast. And so it's kind of a spoiler, but not really, is I discovered Lorenza bought and sold land on her own. And I found that through going through every deed of sale in Caltabellotta from 1916. And I think that's really powerful to know that a woman was buying and selling her own land back then. It's her land it's her name on the deed. And things like that I never expected to find. And we got access to it. And it was all just really, really special.
I cannot wait to listen to the podcast because I already know what happened in the book. So now I need to find out what happened. Okay, speaking of all that happened in the book, good Lord, there are some twists and turns in this novel.
Yes.
I had some things right and I had some things wrong.
Oh, good.
And
that's what I want.
Yeah. And so obviously this novel is not your first rodeo, but you have co-written novels, you have some standalones, but I just want to talk for a minute about your writing process. Yeah. I know that you said you didn't know the ending, so that's amazing. That happened to me. That happens to me nearly every time. But do you outline? Do you talk to us about your writing process, and especially when you have so many characters and a dual timeline?
Yeah. I do not outline. I only recently learned the word pantser. I was in conversation with El Casamano down in Crozet, Virginia.
You've never heard of that?
I never heard it until a month ago. And I was talking to Elle, and she's like, "Are you a planner or a pantser?" And I'm like, "What is a pantser?" So obviously a fly by the seat of your pantser. When I'm co-writing with Kristin loves an outline. We outline the hell out of everything. And she freaks out when I tell people that I don't outline even a little bit. I sit down and I guess I pants, to use the verb of it. I pants every day. When I'm in a novel, it's like 1,500 to 2,000 words a day, and I just go. And then I don't edit. I don't do anything for about 50 pages, and then I'll go back and play around with it. And I did that for both timelines. I mean, I just let them both fly and saw what happened. And then I'd never done dual timelines either. Like, this is everything about this book is totally new to me. Like, I'd never done thrillers. And so then I took each timeline separately and I read them as if they were their own book. I'm like, okay, if you could stand alone as your own book, like that's what I want from you right now.
Okay.
And there was a lot to change then, right? Because sometimes it didn't. And then read the other timeline, did that, and then layered them on top of each other, and then did another read and another draft. And I still didn't have the same ending. Like it was not the ending at that point. And so then I did like my like next like read through and write through, and that's when the ending happened. Like it was really like the character of Juicy, I like to think, was my spirit guide through all of this, because she just kept tapping me on the shoulder, being like, but what if this happened? And I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy, Juicy. No. And then I wake up in the morning and be like, she's totally right. That is exactly what should happen.
Oh, that's amazing. I think that with each go through, I always compare it to, you know, those coffee table books where you keep putting a vellum like this city in 1945, this city in 1952. Yes. And then all of a sudden, what you already wrote becomes clear. Like you can see, because it was already there. It's just that you hadn't put enough layers on it yet. So
yeah. Or it was in your head. It was in my head and like didn't make it to the page yet. And so, so it was a lot of going back. But yeah, no outlining at all, which I know, like a lot of people, I say that and a lot of writers freak out. And I'm just like, for other books I do, for other books I outline, and I didn't for this one.
So I've also heard it. Yeah, I know. We're glad. I've also heard it described as architect versus gardener instead of plotter versus pantser. And I like that better. Architect.
Wait, I've never heard of that one either. How is this possible? Like, how have I written so many books and never heard any of these things?
Because I'm here for you, Joe.
You are.
This is me being here for you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I'll just say something quick about Juicy. What a compelling character, and she skated the line in everything. And every surprise from her was just a joy and a treat. So
I love her, and I've been channeling her as I'm doing book tour stuff. I'm like, what would Juicy wear to this? How big would her hair be? And I'm like, it'd be big, girl. It'd be big,
bigger than that. Yeah,
get it bigger.
That's hilarious.
Okay, we touched a little bit about the podcast that you do. You have 7 of them.
Yeah, there's a lot right now,
including the one for this novel. Tell us about all the different things you do. I feel like you're a glamorous, gorgeous, walking stream of consciousness. Is what I think.
Ron, can you like introduce me like that all the time?
Always.
Like, this is Jo Piazza. She's a glamorous, gorgeous, walking stream of consciousness.
Absolutely.
I love that so much. I'm going to have it put on a t-shirt and then buy one for you as well, so that we can both wear it.
I'll wear
around.
it next week.
Yeah. Perfect. Great. Like I said, I came up as a journalist, and I was a newspaper journalist right before the internet changed everything. I thought I would spend my life in newspapers or magazines, and everything changed a year after I started. I graduated college in 2002, and the medium shifted every 6 months. All of a sudden it was digital, and then social, and then we want more video, and then we want everything to be on Instagram, and then it's back to print. And so I feel like I've kind of become a chameleon, figuring out how to tell good stories through all of these platforms and all of these mediums. Because I do think it's harder and harder to find readers and to find listeners. And so if you can tell the stories where they're at, if you can be where they are, then I think that's really valuable, because people still want stories. They still value stories. And so I think a lot about whether or not I'm like, is this a podcast or is this a book? And for some reason, the Sicilian Inheritance, I was like, it's both a podcast and a book. And oh my gosh, you guys are going to appreciate this so much.
She left us.
She's gone.
I left, but for good reason. It's also a freaking olive oil. My podcast company made the Sicilian Inheritance olive oil. Ron, I'm going to bring you one. Patty, I'm going to send you one. Because I was like, all right, if we're doing this book, then we might as well do this too. Which has been
I love it.
I love it.
Crazy fun. See, it was a good reason for leaving you. And yeah, so I think that podcasting is really a really awesome way to reach people with journalism right now. It's like, I know for me, when I was having my babies, it was how I consumed story, because I was breastfeeding, I was running after toddlers, and I mean, I'm still running after a toddler most of the time. And I could listen to podcasts, but I couldn't sit down and read the newspaper. And so they became really important to me. And I think it's just an intimate way to connect with an audience. And I love getting to do them. They're so fun. And your podcast, it really kept me company through some tough times while I was having these babies, and when I was struggling with what to write next and what to do next. And yeah, I hope that my podcast can do for other people what Friends in Fiction has done for me.
That's very sweet.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're done for today.
And mic drop.
The mic drop.
Mic drop. We're done. Okay, so this has nothing to do with the Sicilian inheritance. And I'm sorry to tangent, but we are not getting out of here without talking about your deep dive into trad wives. Because I could not look away.
I know.
Just talk for a minute about that, and then I promise we're back to the real writing world.
No, I mean, as a person,
that's what you do. You notice what's going on in the world, and you bring it to your listeners. Yeah,
spotlight
and then I talk about it. I can't stop. Yeah, I mean, as a person who now covers social media, and I didn't expect Under the Influence to be any longer than 8 episodes. I was like, okay, I'm going to talk about influencing, and that's it. And now we're 120 episodes deep because social media is media. There's more eyeballs on it than almost anything else that we consume. And the train has left the station. So one of the biggest trends right now on social media is the trad wife, which is it's definitely not a stay-at-home mom. I think stay-at-home moms are heroes and the CEOs of their household. And we should call it work-at-home mom. Stay-at-home mom is just dumb to say, because I'm like, who is staying? Who is just staying in the home? We are all working. We're all moving around. It just discounts the labor of it. But a trad wife is a woman who chooses to be incredibly subservient to her husband, to give up her agency. And it's almost performed with this kind of false 1950s feel, this nostalgia, like you're Betty Draper, you're June Cleaver, you're wearing like this gingham pinafore dress, and you're baking sourdough from scratch and making cereal from scratch while your beautiful children run around your gorgeous, perfectly clean house. And it's this vision of motherhood that never existed in reality. But it's really become a thing. And I think a lot of people are concerned about it because it does make you feel bad as a mother whose life is a mess, which mine is. I mean, I'm staring at my messy bed right now. There's so much shame in it.
So much. Like, why? I guess I can't do it. Like, I just don't know how to be that thing.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, I'm not, well, it also creates these ideas of like, what is a quote unquote good wife and a good mother? And I'm like, I guess I'm not good. Like, I'm not good because I'm not living up to this fake expectation, because what we know is that if you're a creator, someone else is taking your pictures, someone else is cleaning your house, like someone else is dressing you and doing your hair and putting on your fake eyelashes and all of the things, that most of us don't have time to do. And I think it's really dangerous for young moms and new moms and people that think that that's what they're supposed to be. And then they're comparing it, and there's a lot of anxiety in it. So yeah, I've been doing a deep dive. I'm writing a novel about it right now that I've been releasing on my Substack in installments, as if I'm Charles Dickens of trad wife writing.
You're the modern day Dickens of trad wife.
I'm just the modern day Dickens, guys.
Right
next to a gorgeous stream of consciousness.
Yeah, Patty's blurb on Sicilian, Mario Puzo meets Nora Ephron. I'm like, I don't need anything else. Right. We don't have to ask anyone else. That's all I want. I love it. It's perfect.
Well, it's true. It's true.
Wow. I can't wait to dive into that. I've kind of been holding off on some Joe Piazza content, but now I'm all in.
Let yourself all in, Ron, and then I'm going to show up in person, and it's going to be magic.
That's right. We'll bring the trad wives to your event. No.
I've got a trad wife dress for Cleveland. Don't worry.
You do? All right. Good. Mm-hmm. Okay. If you just stick around for another minute, we've got one more question for you. But first, we have a few quick reminders to our listeners and viewers out there.
For all of you who are watching and listening, I'm sorry we interrupted the trad wife discussion, but we're coming back to a couple things. But if you just had the pleasure of meeting Joe, and we encourage you to rush out and buy your copies, if you haven't already, of The Sicilian Inheritance. The perfect place to do that is the Friends in Fiction shop on bookshop.org, where you will be getting it at a discount and helping fund our show, supporting Joe, supporting our beloved independent booksellers nationwide. And we also want to remind you to follow us on Instagram and join our Facebook group. And I am going to say you should really follow Joe
everywhere
on Instagram. Yes. And when you visit friendsinfiction.com, you can stay abreast of all the upcoming guests and shows and the subscription box and our live events and everything else.
Awesome. And if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can catch all our back episodes and never miss a thing. And when you subscribe to our podcast, you can take us with you wherever you go.
All right, Joe, we have more to talk about because, like we said, your Instagram is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I feel as if I know you and your family, although, of course, I don't truly, but your wit shines through. How do you decide what to share and what not to share on these channels? Like you were saying, Substack brought out one part of you.
It did. It
Instagram
really did.
brings out another. Like, how do you decide what to share? It's so hard for me.
It's so hard. And I struggled with it because, as a writer, I do feel a writer who sells books. Like I want people to find my books. I feel a lot of pressure to be on Instagram and to grow an audience and to cultivate that. And when I first started doing it, I think I was trying to imitate everyone else. I'm like, okay, make a beautiful pile of books on your nightstand and put a latte next to it. Like that's what people want. And I think it works for some people. It doesn't work for me. It feels really inauthentic. And so I try to think about Instagram of again, story, like what is the platform and how do you tell stories and what do I want to tell? And I'm like, I want to share the parts of my life that go into being an author. I want to share how hard this is to be a mother and a working author these days. I know a lot of women don't like getting asked the question, how do you do it? Like as a mother and like have this career. And because you would never ask a man, but I don't mind it because I think we have to talk about it because we wouldn't ask a man because women do often shoulder more of the burden. What I try to share on my social is that it's hard and that I'm doing a lot of different things and I'm juggling and I'm failing and give a little peek into my life. I don't show my kids on the grid as much as I used to because I do get nervous about their pictures being out there. I get nervous about all children's pictures being out there. We have no idea what's happening to these pictures, but I do share them in stories because they're real cute. They're real cute, and I like to show them off.
My favorite was when you said this is jet lag and your daughter was like doing your hair and you were trying to work. And I was like, I feel you, girlfriend. I feel you so hard.
Yeah. And so I'm just trying to share snippets of real life and real life of being both a writer and a mom in the world. And it's been great because then I get to hear other people's stories. And that's the connecting with like readers and followers is the second best part. I love the writing of the books and then I love connecting with people. So Instagram, for all of its faults, and there are many, is a great place to do that.
Great.
It is. And speaking of Instagram and social media, I'm a big fan of your Instagram account too, just to throw that in there. I love everything about it. Tell everybody how they can connect with you. Where would they go to get on Instagram and some of the other places online, and also where they can learn about Book Tour and all your podcasts and the spider web that is Joe.
The spider web that is Joe Piazza. Yeah, it's I'm on Instagram at Joe Piazza Author. And that, I keep everything there. Like I've got my website, joepiazza.com. I don't think anyone goes to it. I haven't looked at that in forever. I should probably update it. But joepiazza.com, and then my Substack, which I'm trying to do as much of as possible. I think it's it's a different way of connecting, is Over the Influence. And you can find it by so you can search Over the Influence and Joe Piazza.
Perfect.
Yeah. And your book tour is probably on your website, right?
It is. In fact, I'm about to post the updated one. I wasn't planning on going on a big tour at all because it's hard to leave with the kids. The baby's still little.
Right.
But then we just kept coming up with fun ideas. Like I'm coming to Cleveland because I promised my husband 7 years ago that I would come to see I would see the solar eclipse with him because we saw the last one. We drove to Eastern Oregon with a 7-week-old baby to see the last one. And I'm like, yeah, we're people that travel for eclipses now. And I've been promising my son the whole time. So we're like, all right, I guess it's Cleveland and we're doing a book event and we're going to see an eclipse and we're going to have Negronis with Ron Block.
Oh,
that's
done.
Awesome.
Done.
Dearest Joe, you're amazing. Thank you so much for talking with us about the Sicilian inheritance, about your travels, about your family, about your inspiration, about how hard and wonderful it all is. Thank you for being with us on the Friends in Fiction show.
Thank you for having me.
I can't believe it's over already. I can't
believe it's over.
It's not over.
It's only part one.
It's
only part one.
It's only part one.
It's only part one. All right. Bye, Joe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone out there. Thanks, love. Be sure to tune in next week for when Mary Kay, Kristy, Kristin, and I will be together live to welcome best-selling author, our featured author for the month, April, Emily Henry, to discuss her upcoming novel, Funny Story. That show will air live on the Friends in Fiction Facebook page on April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and on the podcast on Friday, April 19th.
I can't wait for that. And thanks to all of you out there for being with us. We'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye,
Have a great
everyone.
night.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.